The Rise and Shine podcast series is made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois.
The opportunity to be there for a friend. This is essential Torah. Acquire for yourself a friend means create situations that allow you to deepen your relationships.
This is Rise and Shine, a podcast that offers timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations to fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note. Here is Adrienne Gold-Davis.
Being a Jewish mother is a tremendous blessing, but sometimes its realities and day-to-day challenges are shrouded in secrecy. In our desire for privacy and our often misguided shame, we sometimes think that we are the only one with a kid that bites or wets the bed at 10 years old. And we think that we're the only one without any desire whatsoever for intimacy with our partners, or that we fantasize about running far, far away where no one can call out to us. We don't want to hear "Mommy" one more time, especially all we want is some private time in the bathroom. And yet you go to the bookstores and there are shelves and shelves and shelves of books about all the issues that we don't talk with each other, like your defiant child or your explosive child or your difficult child, or how to prioritize your marriage, how to reawaken the spark with date night, all that stuff. So we order them online and we suffer in silence. Well, for the next while, we're taking a slightly different direction here. Instead of the usual 10 minutes, we're extending to 30. And I'm going to talk openly and transparently in real conversation about what parenting can actually feel like, so that we don't all feel like we're in this on our own. You know, for the past 15 years, I've met moms on our momentum trips from every single corner of the globe. And, you know, we all share one common desire. We just want to get it right for our kids and for ourselves. And I've spoken to mothers who gathered up all their strength and they gird themselves and they share a story with me that they are filled with shame or horror about telling. And frankly, some of these stories I hear on repeat. And yet everyone seems to think that they're the only one. Well, now I'm honored to have real conversations with Jessica Berkowitz. Jessica is a writer. She's a ritualist. And she's a liturgist, and she's committed, in her own words, to the discipline of delight. Before she came to us at Momentum, where she's now senior education specialist, she was part of the founding team of One Table, where she served as director of Jewish learning for 7 years. She's also an alumna of Washington University in St. Louis and Baltimore Hebrew University, and she received rabbinic ordination at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And I am, well, among other things, a truth seeker and a truth speaker. And we hope that our conversation will make you feel seen and heard and not so alone, because, as we say at Momentum, together we can do so much more. Welcome, my dear Jessica.
Hi, Adrienne. Thank you so much for having me back.
Are you kidding? There was a demand for us. People seem to love us together. And frankly, it's the nicest half hour of my week. So I want to open with a biggie, if it's okay with you. You know, I used to tell very funny stories about my kids when I was speaking publicly. Actually, I dined out on them. And one day somebody told me it was actually Lashon Hara, like negative, evil speech, to speak about my kids. And I wondered, does this add, or is this a problem when it comes to wanting to share your experiences with other people? Or maybe you're looking for some validation or some normalization of what's going on. And what about one-on-one? Is it still considered Lashon Hara then? Tell me.
Such a good question. I think about this a lot because I also share a lot of stories about my beloved, including on this podcast. I have to tell you, I was playing our episode, one of our episodes in the car. My daughter was listening and she's like, "Is this the part about me?" And she got so excited. She's 7. So she was like, "Fast forwards it to the part about me."
My kids would have gone, I'm so sick of you talking about me.
Right. My daughter is very much a theater kid, and she's like, "Let's get to the part about me." But this actually is a great example. So, is me telling that little anecdote about my daughter, Lashon Hara. Let's think for a minute and clarify what is Lashon Hara. Lashon in Hebrew, tongue, mouth, speech, language. Hara, the bad, the evil. So we're referring to speaking in evil speech or negative speech, particularly when we're talking about someone else, even if what we're saying is true. But like so many things in Judaism, Lashon Hara is really couched in this idea of intention. When your intention is not constructive, when your intention could cause harm, it's Lashon Hara. It's evil speech.
Okay, but hold on a second. You can have the best of intentions and still blow it. Like, for example, once many years ago, I ran into a guy that I used to work with. I hadn't seen him in years and years. And I had happened to run into his father the very week before in some restaurant. And so when I saw this guy, I said to him, "Oh my gosh, I saw your dad last week. He's so fabulous. We had such a great conversation." And this guy turned to me and he says, "Well, that's nice. He hasn't spoken to me in 6 years," and walked away.
Foot in it.
Yeah, I did. Now, this is one example of not even telling good things because you don't know what's going to trigger in someone else. So what I want to do is I want to look at Lashon Hara around our kids under the framework of breaking down that kind of mommy Olympics of silence. How do I do it? How do I go about, notwithstanding standing on a stage and like sharing the stories for fun without using their name or making people feel normal? Tell me about, the Torah basis for these ideas and how we can work around this so we can break down that conspiracy of silence.
Oh, the conspiracy of silence.
Yeah.
Love that. So there's a couple texts rooted in Torah that I think we need to elevate moving forward. One is from Vayikra, from Leviticus chapter 19. Do not go around telling tales, being a talebearer among your people. And famously in the Torah, there's they drop a really juicy direction, but then don't expand or expound upon it. So you could look at this line and say, what does that mean? Should I not lie? Are they talking about telling tales? Are they talking about tale bearing, like sharing stories? Like what exactly does that mean? Right. And then a companion pasuk, a companion verse from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, that says, Lo tichal lehitavam. You must not remain indifferent. So you can extrapolate from that if you stay silent about struggle or particularly when struggle could lead to isolation, you're also posing a spiritual risk. So on the one hand, don't go around telling tales, but also don't remain indifferent. So the way that this over the century, and this is what is so cool about the evolution of Jewish law and the evolution of the way we function as a Jewish people in society, is that a couple thousand years later, we are still grappling with what this means. And we have the Chofetz Chaim, a beloved and well-known 20th century posek, like a decider of Jewish law and philosopher and just a rabbi who talks about the concept of to'elet, the constructive kind of speech. So this gives us kind of 3 pillars to bounce around between, which is if you are seeking support, wisdom, or healing, and within that scaffolding of support, wisdom, and healing, you're not shaming, then it's not Lashon Hara.
So basically doing it from a public stage in order to make other people feel more normal about their kids is still Lashon Hara.
Well,
what if I don't use their names?
So
I want to tell you, Jessica, after our trips, sometimes when I tell stories about my kids without using their names, people come up to me and say, "You've made me feel like my kid is normal."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a fine line. So go on. So
But I think from the stage, you are within those parameters of you're doing it for a constructive purpose. You are in the role of someone who is offering a kind of pastoral care, right? You're offering support, you're sharing wisdom, you're creating a space among these women for healing. And around this idea of anonymity, I think it's really interesting. Like, I have one kid. So if I tell a story about my kid, it doesn't matter whether I use her name or not, right? But let's look at an example of this from the text, right? Just as Jews, part of our sort of assignment of meaning making in the world is build off of your inheritance and what we have inherited in the text. There's a really great midrash, which I have described in the past. Midrash is sort of like fan fiction that the rabbis and the sages create based on the Torah, asking questions like, why do we not have that explanation? Why do we not expound on this verse? So the Torah is looking at the story of what Sarah says.
oh, I know where you're going.
You know where I was going with this? What does Sarah, this is a great one. What does Sarah say when she finds out I think she's what, 99 or 109, I forget. She's old. Sarah's old. She finds out that she's pregnant, okay? And the line in the Torah says, Sarah laughed within herself. And she says to herself, after I have withered and my husband is so old that I should be... Now, in the Midrash, Hashem retells the story. God recontextualizes the story. And this version of the story is, why did Sarah laugh? Why did Sarah say, I'm going to bear a child, I'm going to have a baby now that I'm old? Now, what's the difference here? In the second version, she says, I'm old, but she doesn't call Abraham old. She decides, she's like, God is retelling the story and is like, you know what? I'm telling the story with purpose. I'm trying to capture my audience of people who are feeling that struggle, God forbid, of wanting to have children and not being able to conceive. And to take out the part that doesn't necessarily matter as much to the ikar, the essence of the story, but that kind of is like, yeah, we don't need to call Adrienne to call Abraham old in this story. And this is the model. And Rashi, the great commentator, says this, that God modifies Sarah's words out of this idea of like kavod habriot, to protect dignity, and that this should be our model, that we should speak honestly, and sometimes we should edit for compassion.
Wow. Say that line again. Speak honestly.
We should speak honestly, and as necessary, we should edit for compassion.
Okay, so that's not lying by omission?
Well, think about it. Like, let's think about it. Sure, maybe it is. But one thing I think that you find in a lot of Jewish texts and in a lot of Jewish teaching is that telling the story doesn't necessarily mean you need to tell the whole story.
True.
Right?
True.
And that there are times when it's perfectly acceptable to what we would call lie by omission or white lie. And to do so, again, going back to this idea of what is my intention? That does not mean that every time we have good intentions and we're within that sort of scaffolding of healing and wisdom, that we're always going to have good outcomes.
Right.
But the structure of what it means to be Jewish is to set us up for success in our meaning making, not necessarily guarantee success, because that's not realistic.
Okay, I get that. And I sometimes think that we rely too much on intentions to excuse Lashon Hara or bad behavior. Can't tell you how many times I have found myself saying, "Oh, I didn't mean to like step out of line here. I didn't mean to like share your secret. I didn't mean to. I was only." And I think that these laws are in place because sometimes good intention isn't enough. There seems to be a need for real boundaries around our speech that inadvertently, like I did with that guy and his father, you can put your foot in it. So, when I think back to that situation when I met him, it probably would have been better to just say nothing. say how good it was to see him. Or if I had to include the fact that I saw his father, maybe I should have said, oh, I did run into your father a week ago as well. Wow, that's ironic. And not, spoken glowingly about his kid, which brings me to the next thing, which is when we speak glowingly even about our children, we can also provoke in other people a sense of jealousy or a feeling of being threatened that their kid doesn't do that. So sometimes speaking about our kids in a positive way can also provoke a negative reaction in someone else. So I think what this comes down to for me is if I'm trying to find a way to share stories about my kids for constructive healing growth purposes for myself, then there has to be a way to do it and a person with whom to do it where it's appropriate. So tell me what you think.
So let's break down a couple things. One is, what are the takeaways for our listeners here? And I think one is asking yourself about intention, right? That's one tool. Are you seeking support, wisdom, or healing? And then another tool is first person framing. How can you honor what you need to share or honor your dignity, your child's dignity, the dignity of the other, while still living in the world? Whether that means you're telling a story that names your pain or you're interacting with an old friend whose father you just saw. And this first person framing tool is share how you feel rather than what they did. And you may have, if anyone has gone to couples counseling, you have heard this when your therapist says, please speak in I statements, right?
I still don't understand it thousands of dollars later. What does that look like in this case?
Well, a great example would be, I am struggling with my feelings of ineffectual parenting.
Mm.
I am struggling with my relationship with the amount of screen time I give my daughter. I'm now shifting from the story being about my daughter and her behavior to what my actual feelings and my actual pain points are, rather than telling the anecdotal story about the huge fight we got into over the iPad yesterday. So really, that's not a true story.
Well, never happened in this house either. Do you know, I want to tell you something that once one of my kids said this to me. You can take my computer, you can take my Game Boy, you can take the television, you can take the air I breathe. I don't care. And then I went, okay, I'm finished now. I got nothing left.
Oh my God. I would have been like, but you can never take our freedom.
And I will never stop loving you. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God. Okay.
All right. Go on.
So, okay. So we have a couple tools, right? And we will deal with our children. And I've been in that space as well, which is like, they don't care. But let's look at the other thing that you said that was really, really fascinating, which is, would it have been better with your friend who's in the difficult, estranged relationship with his father? Would it have been better to just say nothing? And I want to argue that the answer is a resounding no, because what that opened up for you and your friend in that moment is the opportunity for you to learn something about him that you can potentially turn into, hey, do you want to talk about it? Hey, do you have resources for that? Hey, I have a friend who's going through that too. Like, let's talk about it. Let's connect. Like, the opportunity to be there for a friend, to find, this is essential Torah, right? Pirkei Avot, like the most essential, most often repeated Mishnah, acquire for yourself a friend, doesn't mean go out and look for friends. It means create situations that allow you to deepen your relationships. And that's what you did.
Except that he turned on his heel and he walked away from me. That's how I knew that my description of how fabulous his father was over the top. It was the first time I ever really understood the laws against overly praising people publicly, which is also the laws of speech. And I think what you're saying is correct. And I wonder, I'm going to go back to my initial question to you. I understand that everything you're saying is accurate. I still need to know if I've acquired myself a friend or perhaps someone else. Is it permissible to have one person with whom you share the details of everything, providing you trust that they're not colluding with you, but they're rather trying to elevate you?
I would argue it's not only permissible, it's essential. When Kohelet teaches, woe to the one who is alone. Okay, and it's a recapitulation of an idea from the very first chapter of Genesis, which is that we're not meant to be alone. We human beings are not meant to be alone. And there's a sort of short or simple meaning of that idea, which is we're meant to have partners, we're meant to have friends. But the deeper meaning of that is that we're not meant to go through the experience of life on our own. We're not meant to carry emotional burdens alone. We're not meant to create community alone. You can't. It's impossible. So the idea of finding someone trustworthy who holds your words in confidence and without judgment is essential. And that could be like the relationship that we have, right? Off mic, right? We pretty much feel like we can talk about anything with each other. And that grew out of a collegial relationship, which is fascinating and a testament, honestly, to momentum. And I'm serious, the kind of relationships that we try to build as an organization that can be collegial, but also have these elements of deep trust and love and affection. It could be a rabbi or a rebbitzin in your life. It could be in a spiritual context. It could be a therapist or someone who works with you as a coach, a life coach, a professional coach. It could be a close friend or a support circle, like a 12-step circle, like AA or NA. So having that is not only permissible, it is essential.
That's, one of the things I've heard you say in the past is that a person can create connection without exposing others, and that there are certain techniques that make that happen.
So I think that that takes us to our third tool for our toolkit that our listeners are going to leave with. Speak with ahava and anava. Now, these words are very similar sounding, so I'll say them again in Hebrew. Ahava, love, and anava, humility. Ahava and anava. And even have a little mantra for yourself. Before you say the thing, just take a minute. We often rush to talk. It's a very Western cultural way of being in the world, that instead of listening, we're thinking about what we're going to say next. And we feel like we have to fill the space. We have to fill the air. Well, take a second. Is what I'm about to say spoken with ahava and anava? So what does that mean, love and humility? Okay.
Right.
Focus on your own emotional experience. Avoid public airing of private grievances. Is this something that needs to be shared publicly? Am I going to talk about my issues with so-and-so on the podcast? No. Name needs without naming names. That goes back to our speaking in I statements, right? Our first person narrative. What do I need? What are my actual first person feelings without necessarily naming the names involved in generating that struggle or need?
I think that is an exquisite triad of ideas. Jessica, I was thinking that one of the criteria for me having a friend is that person never gets down in the mud with me, that we make a decision that whatever we're talking about, their response, even if they're the person that I can use names with and share my feelings with, will help me reframe to the positive, will help remind me of the humility that it requires in life to have interpersonal relationships with people who are not identical to you, and that their love of me will allow them to advise me without indulging me. That, you said earlier, acquire a friend. Do you have any thoughts about what it takes to acquire someone like that? Because frankly, I'm not saying at the beginning that I should be able to stand up in the schoolyard or in the in the park and say, my kid's still wetting his bed and he's 9, that's not what I'm suggesting. But I also know that one of the most extraordinary experiences, I have to share this with you because I can, and of course the thousands of people listening, but many years ago, early in the first year of having children, I was at a park with my very best friend. We were pushing our babies on the swings, and we were talking about a particular marital counselor that we both shared. And she told me that she was going to, that she was worried because there hadn't been any intimacy in her marriage since the baby had been born, and the baby was like 6 months old. And I remember saying back to her, yeah, I think that's completely normal. I don't think that's like a reason to go to therapy. And a woman, a Caribbean nanny sitting in the sandbox, called out and said, my husband and I once went 1.5 years. And another nanny who was beside us went, I once went 2 years. And it was something so healing in that moment. So those kind of things don't happen very frequently. But I want to understand what it takes to find and be the person who doesn't live in shame around their parenting, that can give other people permission to do the same.
It's incredible that you had that friendship at such a pivotal point in your life. And there are, I think, sort of social insertions like mommy and me groups where you're trying really hard to have someone to go through that experience with. But what you saw there on the playground was like, as soon as you gave voice to this particular struggle, it turns out many people share it. Many people share it. And if you don't give voice to the struggle, then not only do you not give people an opportunity to show up as their full self in relation to you, but you're not also authentically showing up. And I think this question of how we find those relationships and those friendships is one that I admittedly struggle with and don't have a great answer to, particularly in my early 40s. So, and I've heard others talk about this at this life stage where you're not like meeting people on the regular because you have kids. So, and even in the context of like, do I run into my other parents of who have kids my kids' age? Maybe. But my example for this would be I have what can best be described as a friend crush right now, where I met this woman at Camp Ramah Family Day. Okay. And I really want to be friends with her. Like, she's super bright. She's a lawyer. She represents women. She's just, that feeling when you meet someone, you're like, I want to be your friend so bad.
Oh, it's a girl crush. I had one on you the minute I met you.
Oh, girl, I love you. And look what happened. We've blossomed. This woman lives, like about an hour from me in Boulder. So we're not going to bump into each other. Our daughters are the same age. But like, if it were up to me, I swear to God, I would be like, let's have a play date every Sunday for our daughters so that we can build our friendship. And it's really difficult. Like, we're women in our early 40s. What am I supposed to do? Like, text her? Like, do I just say, hey, like, do you want to hang out? Like, do you want to be friends? Like, what do I do?
Okay, I'll tell you what you do. This is what we do. We finish for now with this because I want to talk about this for our next week's podcast, which also has to do with boundaries with our children and with new friends. Like, what's stalking and, what's
stalking?
What is stalking and what is care? Thank you for this. I have a lot to think about. I want to reiterate, focusing on our own emotional experience, avoiding public area of private struggles, naming needs without naming names. Jessica, thank you. We'll speak next week.
Thank you so much for having me, Adrienne.
Love being with you. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Shine. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Momentum Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Adrienne again next time for more timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations. that fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note.
This podcast was made possible by the generous support of Bonnie Vozar of Chicago, Illinois. Spread the wisdom. Inspire Jewish individuals around the globe by supporting Momentum's podcasts. To sponsor, contact podcast@momentumunlimited.org. You're listening to a Momentum podcast. For unlimited inspiration, wisdom, and empowerment, visit momentumunlimited.org.